Hello, everyone. Hi, welcome to the next Disruption Talk by Netguru, a podcast of true digital disruptors. Today, I have a real treat for you. My name is Agnieszka Hyla-Pochrzęst. I'm a digital delivery lead at Netguru, and I am delighted to welcome with us Nishtha Jain, Head of Innovation and Digital Technology at Takeda. Welcome, Nishtha.
Thank you. Thank you, Aga, for having me on Disruption Talks. I'm really excited to be here today.
Please let me tell you that we are all very excited to have you with us. Just before we go into the full of merit discussion about the technicalities of your role and what you've been introducing at Takeda, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Takeda Pharmaceutical.
Thank you. So my role at Takeda is to oversee innovation and digital technologies for driving efficiencies, optimizing business processes, and creating strategic value for global R&D quality function that spans across the entire R&D pipeline, including PV for clinical, commercial products, and devices throughout their life cycles. And my key approach has been, in my role, has been advocating for a problem-first approach, which is essentially, trying to prioritize the problem at hand and not implementing technology or deploying technology solution for sake of it. And this method has led me to developing multiple minimal viable products and AI-driven experiments, which are aimed at addressing root causes of various processes for creating essentially high value for the company.
Well, what you've mentioned, the problem-first approach is very important. We have a lot of implementations, in the history of Netguru, and this is one of the most often heard arguments when we are discussing implementations with our clients, that the users are saying we have a lot of digital innovations, a lot of digital tools implemented, and this is just overwhelming. So still, before we dive any further in, can you share a little bit about the company itself, about Takeda?
Yeah, of course. So Takeda Pharmaceuticals is a 240-year-old Japanese pharma company. We are a global value-based R&D driven biopharmaceutical leader, with a very large US presence actually, and headquartered here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And Takeda has unwavering commitment to putting patients first, which guides our scientific discovery, as well as it's helping us strive to address unmet medical needs.
Okay. We're at a very exciting moment, I feel, for several years now. A lot of digital innovations come in play, and big pharmaceutical companies like Takeda itself, they have been transforming with the use of technology. What excites you the most in this digital transformation right now?
Yeah, so I know the whole world is excited about it, but I'm deeply excited about the rapid evolution of GenAI, which is generative AI, not just as a technological breakthrough, but essentially as a catalyst for reimagining how we work, we create, and we solve problems. We are witnessing a shift from AI just being used to automate our tasks to now actually being a co-creator, a strategist, and a thought partner. So when you think about the early Gen AI days, they were just focusing on, say, content creation. It would generate some text, it would generate codes, images, etc. But today, what we are seeing are more profound applications of Gen AI in biopharma, where Gen AI can now be used from shaping drug discovery pipelines to actually enabling personalized healthcare journeys with the precision that we never thought of. So when we look at the corporate world, AI is now not only drafting business strategies, it's summarizing insights from thousands of documents, and even supporting, say, like emotionally intelligent conversations when it comes to customer care or interacting with patients and customer. So I would say what's thrilling is not just that we are automating the past, but it's actually that we are able to invent entirely new ways of working in the future. And Gen AI is sort of becoming an extension of human curiosity and creativity. Only, obviously done purposefully, done with the right governance. But I think honestly, we are standing at an edge of a new paradigm where AI is not just only for work but for our thinking. So I do think that's where sort of the digital transformation lies as we go into the future. This is sort of, I believe, the most impactful technology that we'll be seeing growing.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that very much. I think that you might agree with me with a hypothesis that, well, as it is with all things new, there is a lot of hype around AI. We even come across clients sometimes saying that they feel forced internally within company to implement something, anything small, just to show that they are capable of doing that. I wonder if you have any specific ways of telling whether this chosen project idea is really going to bring value to the users.
Yeah, so I think for the value piece, what I suggest is, and what I've sort of followed is a 70-20-10 framework, where, in order to generate the value, one could essentially think of 70% being the day-to-day, like the day-to-day innovation, where, you are focusing on most of your business drivers and you are focusing on implementing, everyday applications. Then the 20% focus could be on innovative projects where, say, that percentage could be spent on experimentation with new technology. So say if 70% of and I'm going to take example of Gen AI. So, in 70%, Gen AI could be, your day-to-day tools, helping you summarize the documents, helping you in your daily efficiency. But then 20% could be actually saying, okay, these are my business processes. Now let me take a step back and see where I could bring this in, Gen AI, where it would probably be able to take away that task from you and save that time for you. But then I'm not sure. So let me spend that 20% of the time experimenting with it and trying to see, how it could help me. And then I would say that the 10% in that 100 would be disruptive explorations where, I would think of something where it's even further than business processes, where it's something where it could be a Gen AI created agent and multi-agents where agent itself is doing the work, which by the way is actually happening. But I would say that 10% could be for more of disruptive innovation, where something you have not seen working so far, and you're trying to bring something new, which might not be that easy to bring in a highly regulated industry like ours. But that would be sort of how I would break it down.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Prioritization is very important. Maybe you could share with us some of your early lessons that you have learned introducing Gen AI solutions internally in a pharma company.
Yeah, so that's a very powerful and relevant question, especially when it comes to Gen AI. So before I share my thoughts, I do want to say, so technology adoption is not about technology. People think it's about bringing the best of the tools. It's actually, technology adoption is actually about culture and people. Because, without that, I mean, you could be implementing any technology, but it's not gonna see the adoption. So in that, I would say like maybe three things, where the first one would be, co-creation and sort of a top-down approach, where, the most successful Gen AI pilots I've usually seen are, involving employees in that process. So when employees are sort of active part of the use cases, where as you are building the use cases, you are creating the feedback loops and employees can actually feedback into the process. That's when Gen AI pilots can be successful, because it helps in, better collaboration and not sort of passive adoption in a way. And then also it's driven from the top, where the leader itself is trying to say, this is how we're going to roll the projects out. So it's like the top down approach. I think number two is sort of communication, that where, so there is a lot of fear around employees thinking, okay, how AI is being used and why, and there is little bit of still a black box, where people have this in mind that is it going to replace me? So instead of I think the best approach is communicating and addressing that fear factor early, that it's not going to replace people, but it's actually going to help them do the work faster. So if that is addressed properly and communicated, again, top down, and in a way where people feel secure, and they can address their concerns related to their own job security, I think that's the other piece that I would say is very, very crucial, that could help in making these pilots implemented faster, and people's mindset, people being excited about the technology. And lastly, I think it's not, GenAI is not just a tool, it's literally like a new sort of literacy or a subject, so to speak. So giving people different tools and options and platforms at a company to be able to learn learn it faster and upskill, and which eventually what's going to happen is that it will help people get to firstly do their jobs faster, because if you're doing a research project, for example, or a research based job, what it can help you do is it can get you at least 50 to 60% there, because it does the research super fast versus the old traditional methods. Versus if you are in a writing job, it can do the same thing. It can help you get there. But again, there is still that 30-20% you have to still, review, revise it and everything. But I think it's getting you there. And similarly, there are so many tasks that it could automate for you. So so upskilling is the third element. So if all these things are done, strategically, there's definitely, I've seen, possible, great way to drive GenAI adoption.
It's interesting that you mentioned upskilling and how important it is in the teams, because there is this study by Gartner, I think, that shows that in several years from now, there is going to be a substantial shortage of employees who are literate with AI, and they are accustomed with using AI, and it's fairly easy for them to employ new solutions. So upskilling is one of the most important things that the companies can do right now. That's very important that you've mentioned it. I wonder, how do you evaluate whether a new tool, like let's say an AI agent, is truly solving a problem that users have versus just being the next big thing in the company?
Yeah, I think that's such an amazing question. So I would say, before diving into AI agents, what companies need to do is they need to assess their organizational readiness, which actually means that they have to evaluate whether they have the right culture, the executive sponsorship, at a CEO, at the C level, to be able to invest in these solutions, and also talent in place which is willing to support these agents. And when I say talent, it means the talent who's willing to learn and adapt. In addition, as any other AI tool, AI agents are built on good data. Because if your data is not labeled properly, the files are not marked properly, like AI agents would work. But so say you have a file called file A 5 times in your drive or folder, it's gonna not know which one you are calling for. So if I'm saying I want file A from 2025, it's gonna give me all the files. Versus, so it's all about the data, that it needs to be very, very accurate, curated, fit for purpose. So I think once all of that, and in addition to that, definitely data governance, so that way agents, as you create them, are sort of not touching any data or any area that they're not supposed to touch. So they are, definitely a strong data governance in place. So I think once all of that is in check, I think what you again need to see is where I come back to my initial thought, which was, is the problem that you are solving for has some of these elements, where for a classic for a classic AI agent use case, you want to look for a process that's repetitive and can be automated. It's pretty much something you don't need your brain power, and it can do by itself. Number two, what you need to do is you need to identify whether this process has multiple actions that are interconnected, and it needs complex decision making, which in general for you might be tough to do. And I think the classic use case is actually trying to see whether the information and data is spread across multiple systems, multiple sources, and needs constant monitoring. I think these are the three places. Once you have all the basics that I talked about, which is your executive sponsorship, right culture, data ready, I think these are the three pieces people could look at to identify the right problem. And then I think AI agent can provide them a seamless experience once all of that is in place. And, it could be applied to any of these three problem use cases.
These are quite a lot of areas to take into consideration, right? And what you mentioned about the state of the data within the company, it actually puts a lot of stress on employees as well, because in many cases before, some very important data didn't even end up in the systems because people were too busy, right? There were some notes, paper notes, maybe something in the emails, and it wasn't really gathered properly. And now this whole policy in regards to organizing everything very well and keeping things structured to enable implementations that are AI-based is a very important thing, definitely as well. But you have mentioned before about the fear factor and about keeping people's mindset in mind when we introduce those solutions. So how do you perceive the role of people's behaviors, their mindset, their perseverance, how they will approach the new technology, especially when technology moves faster than the people move, which is currently the case?
Sure. And I think this is a very, very amazing and on-point question, because I think, as I mentioned, technology is all about the culture, the mindset, people, and for people, it's their mindset that has to look like that. So I usually talk about this 3C framework, which is essentially 3 Cs, which is curious. Number one is curiosity. Number two is courage, and number three is collaboration and community. So curiosity, I'll break those down really quickly. So curiosity is because technology, as you mentioned, and we are seeing, is evolving super, super fast. And every week we are waking up to a news where we hear things that are like, wow, this now, this is where we are in technology. I think what worked yesterday may be outdated tomorrow. So I think what is essentially needed is curiosity mindset, because it fuels not only lifelong learning and experimentation, but it's actually your willingness to actually take that news and say, okay, let me explore this tool and trend and stay open to the trends, and not actually, be fearful of the trends. And that's where the courage comes in, because once you are curious, you see these trends coming in, you are curious to try them out. I think that it's the courage where you have to say, okay, you know what, I have to step above, like, let that fear go and take the courage to step into the unknown challenge, which is essentially trying to think of how these traditional workflows can change, or traditional business processes. Because if we can clearly see a fit to purpose and a problem that can be solved, I think it needs then courage for people to say, okay, you know what, I know I have done this thing for 10 years like this, but now it can be done differently. So it's okay. Let me be courageous. Let me try to embrace this change. I know it's uncomfortable, because for 10 years I've been doing this, but now it's gonna change. So I think that ambiguity and letting okay, like knowing that, being courageous, right? Like knowing that it is gonna disrupt things, but trying to do that. And I think third is that collaboration piece, where it's about building that network, again, within the company, outside the role, outside your company, or wherever your role is sitting in the organization, to sort of either build that community or find the communities of folks who are actually already early adopters, or who are taking that step beyond the courage to actually do these things. So that way you can share the learnings, and that's where you can create trustful communities, and feel included, that you are not alone, and there are other people doing that, which I think it's very, very powerful, because once you are experimenting with different things and you have the right community to be able to share, to give you feedback, and to build that trust, I think that could go really long way.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So we have curiosity, we have courage, and then collaboration and building the
And
community
collaboration
around.
and community.
Yeah. Okay, I see. Nishtha, we have a very interesting question from our audience about
Yes.
measuring success. How
Yes.
do we measure a success of an AI implementation? How do you do that?
Yeah, so I think for measuring the success, obviously data is a great factor in it. So anytime you're setting up an experiment, or setting up to say, okay, I'm gonna test out this technology, I think best way is to maybe set up some KPIs or metrics to say, okay, this is how I'm gonna track it again. So for example, if this tool is gonna help me save 2,000 hours, let me
Yeah.
see if it did that. Number two could be, did it help me in the productivity? Okay, 20% increase or 10% decrease. Similarly, time. So I think we need to think of like breaking it down in that way, setting certain KPIs, and how
Okay.
I'm going to calculate my ROI. I think if we do that very upfront as we are experimenting, or setting up that 4 or 6 week or 8 week experiment, I think that could be a very real way of assessing. So that's definitely number one piece, the KPI metric. But then actually, as I mentioned, which is co-creation, which is having your user in the loop and checking that metrics, and cross confirming with the user whether this is something
Yeah.
they have actually been able to realize. And I'll be very honest, sometimes the realization takes time. It's a slow burn. It's not something it happens right away. But at least if you have a North Star in mind, then if you're experimenting, you can measure some of these results.
Yeah, definitely. And keeping the users in the loop, like you've mentioned, to have their feedback at all times. Okay, so the last question, but not least one, definitely not. A little bit of advice for the leaders. So in the rapidly changing AI landscape that we're currently facing, what advice do you have to everyone, basically, to either leadership or employees or middle level of management, how to get around this disruption wisely?
Sure. So again, disruption doesn't mean displacement. So it can actually, disruption means reinvention, and not displacement of anything. So the key is shifting from resistance to readiness. And for that, I have, for leaders, so I have two pieces of advice for leaders. I would say focusing on augmentation and not just efficiency, and staying open-minded, investing in upskilling their employees, reimagining roles, and not eliminating them. So actually, repositioning the positions, and not saying, oh, I don't need this role, but thinking of, okay, how can I repurpose the role and have upskill my employee and fit them in that role? So that's for leaders. But then for employees, which is actually very, very interesting one, and I think everybody has probably heard that before, that AI won't take your job, but it would be someone who's using the AI strategically, creatively, and ethically might. So just keeping that in mind, that AI is not here to take your job, but if it's the person who knows how to use it. So the future belongs to curious, courageous, and the collaborative. So if we work with those mindsets and actually try to think of upskilling and learning right prompts, right ways of working with this technology, I think we could be those people who, might be like whose job would not be replaced, essentially.
Oh yeah, that's definitely very wise. Thank you very much for those advices. We do have a tiny little bit of time left, and
Yes.
another question from the audience, from
Yes.
Masha this time. Masha asks, wondering if there was a case of an experiment, AI experiment, failing, so giving wrong results, and going back to how things were operated before, or pivoting on the idea. Do you have an experience like that?
Yeah, so actually, in my like very initially, when I tried to bring an AI use case in, it did fail, and not fail as in. So what I tried to do is, okay, let's bring this tool and let's have people test it out. But how I was thinking about it is, I was thinking the functionality and the back end of the solution, but the failure there was that what I noticed is that when my users tested the tool out, it wasn't initially created for them per se. So it was a more general tool, and we do see a lot of tools that are not customized to the users, but they are more general enterprise tools. So even though the feedback I got from the users is that it's great, I like XYZ feature, like I'm liking this, but it's not something I would want to use every day. And it's because the interface or the UI design wasn't customized for them. So definitely that personalization and customization is something that has to be fit for purpose for the user. So that would be, I would say, where sort of that use case failed and it never got scaled, and there was no way to actually convince users to use it. So even though we could have scaled it, but users said, I don't think I'm going to use it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, in some cases it happens when you try to encourage the user to use a tool that is an additional tool to their already established
Exactly. Yes.
environment, right? So it's better to integrate to what already exists than put something like a standalone. Okay. Thank you very much for meeting us and having this discussion with me today, Nishtha. I hope from our users' perspective that it was very, very interesting. It definitely was for me. I hope that you have a great day today and that all of you do. Thank you very much, and let's connect during our next disruption talk. Thank you. Thank you, Nishtha.
Thank you.